The deafening sound of gunshots ripped through the quiet afternoon air as Olivia Caldwell ducked behind an overturned wagon, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. This wasn't how she'd imagined her arrival in Timber Creek would unfold, caught in the crossfire of what appeared to be a bank robbery gone wrong. Her carefully packed trunks lay scattered in the dusty street, the contents of her life exposed for all to see, much like her now uncertain future. Olivia had traveled over 1,000 miles from Boston to this remote Wyoming settlement, hoping to escape the whispers that followed her after being left at the altar. It was 1878, and at 26, she was well on her way to spinsterhood, something her former fiancé had made abundantly clear when he'd chosen her younger cousin over her. The teaching position advertised in Timber Creek had seemed like Providence, a chance to start fresh where no one knew her shameful past. Now, as bullets splintered the wood beside her head, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. "Stay down," a deep voice commanded as a tall figure slid into position beside her, the brim of his Stetson pulled low over intense blue eyes. In one fluid motion, he drew his revolver and returned fire, his movements precise and controlled. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. The man's weathered face was striking, all sharp angles and purpose. Dust clung to his denim shirt and leather vest, and a deputy's badge glinted on his chest. "I need to get to the schoolhouse," she managed, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. The man spared her a quick glance. "You picked one hell of a day to arrive, madam. You must be the new schoolteacher." Another volley of shots rang out, and he pushed her lower behind the wagon. "Lucas Lancaster, deputy sheriff," he said, extending his free hand briefly before returning it to his weapon. "Welcome to Timber Creek." The irony of his words wasn't lost on Olivia as she huddled closer to the ground, dirt staining her once pristine traveling suit. "Olivia Caldwell," she replied, ducking instinctively as a bullet whizzed overhead. "Is this a common occurrence in your town, Deputy Lancaster?" His lips quirked slightly. "Only on Tuesdays." Before she could determine whether he was joking, he shouted to someone across the street. Moments later, several more shots were fired, followed by men yelling and the sound of horses galloping away. "They're heading out of town," Lancaster called to someone Olivia couldn't see. "Nathan, take a couple men and follow them. Don't engage unless necessary." He turned back to Olivia, his expression softening slightly. "Let's get you somewhere safe, Miss Caldwell. Your introduction to our town has been less than ideal." That, Olivia thought as she accepted his outstretched hand, was quite the understatement. Lancaster helped her gather what remained of her belongings, loading them onto a nearby wagon. 2 of her trunks had been shot through, and one of her precious books had a bullet hole clean through the middle. "I'll replace that," Lancaster said, noticing her distress as she held the damaged volume. "Town's responsibility, seeing as how we failed to provide you with the peaceful arrival you were promised." "It's Emerson," she said, running her fingers over the marred cover. "It can't simply be replaced." Something flickered in his eyes, recognition, perhaps, or surprise. "You're right. I apologize." The schoolhouse and adjoining teachers' quarters stood at the edge of town, a simple white building with a bell tower that seemed to belong in a more civilized place. Lancaster carried her trunks inside while Olivia took stock of what would be her new home. The quarters were modest but clean: a small bedroom, a sitting area with a stone fireplace, and a kitchenette with a pump for water. Someone had placed wildflowers in a mason jar on the table, a welcoming touch that brought unexpected tears to Olivia's eyes. "Mayor's wife thought you might appreciate some color," Lancaster explained, watching her reaction carefully. "Mrs. Bennet tends to believe flowers solve most problems." "They're lovely," Olivia said, gathering her composure. "Please thank her for me." Lancaster nodded, setting down the last of her trunks. He seemed reluctant to leave, shifting his weight from one foot to the other before finally speaking. "School term doesn't start for another 2 weeks. Gives you time to settle in, meet the townsfolk under better circumstances. And will there be more bank robberies in those 2 weeks, Deputy? Olivia asked, unable to keep a hint of sharpness from her voice. Lancaster's face broke into an unexpected grin that transformed his features entirely, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. I'll do my best to schedule them when you're not out and about, Miss Caldwell. Despite herself, Olivia felt a smile tug at her lips. I would appreciate that consideration. He tipped his hat to her. Welcome to Timber Creek, Miss Caldwell. It gets better, I promise. As the door closed behind him, Olivia sank onto the nearest chair, her legs finally giving way. Her hands shook as the reality of the day's events caught up with her. This wild, lawless place was nothing like Boston's ordered streets and polite society. How could she possibly belong here? The next morning, Olivia awoke to knocking at her door. Still in her nightgown and wrapper, she cautiously peered through the curtain to find a woman about her age standing on her porch, holding a basket covered with a checkered cloth. Good morning, the woman called cheerfully. I'm Eleanor Bennett, the mayor's wife. I thought you might appreciate some breakfast after yesterday's excitement. Hastily pinning up her hair, Olivia opened the door. Eleanor Bennett was a pretty woman with kind eyes and an easy smile, dressed in a practical blue calico dress. That's very kind of you, Mrs. Bennett. Please come in. Call me Eleanor, please, she insisted, sweeping into the room with practiced grace. Everyone in Timber Creek is on a first-name basis, except with the schoolteacher, of course. You'll always be Miss Caldwell to the children. Eleanor said about unpacking her basket fresh biscuits, a jar of preserves, boiled eggs, and a pot of coffee. The domestic normalcy of it was almost disorienting after the previous day's violence. I heard about your arrival, Eleanor continued, pouring coffee into 2 cups she'd produced from the basket. Lucas told my husband everything. We're mortified, of course. That's not the welcome we had planned for you. Deputy Lancaster was very helpful, Olivia said carefully, accepting the steaming cup. Eleanor's eyes sparkled with interest. Was he now? That's not a word many would use to describe Lucas Lancaster. Intimidating, stubborn, infuriatingly principled, those are more common. He seemed competent, Olivia offered, unsure why her cheeks felt warm. Oh, he's that, Eleanor agreed, spreading jam on a biscuit. Best deputy Sheriff Miller's ever had. Came here 3 years ago from somewhere back east, never says where exactly, and turned our town around. Crime's down, the streets are safer. He's even got the miners and the ranchers coexisting without killing each other, which is nothing short of miraculous. Olivia took a bite of the offered biscuit, finding it deliciously light. You make it sound as though he single-handedly tamed Timber Creek. Eleanor laughed. Not quite, but he's made a difference. Between you and me, the town council's hoping he'll run for sheriff when Miller retires next year. She leaned forward conspiratorially. Every unmarried woman in 3 counties has set her cap for him, but he doesn't seem to notice. Focused on his job, that one. Olivia carefully steered the conversation away from the deputy and toward more practical matters: the school, her pupils, the town's expectations. By the time Eleanor left, promising to return that afternoon to introduce her around town, Olivia had a clearer picture of what awaited her. Timber Creek was larger than she'd initially thought, with nearly 500 residents. The timber industry that gave the town its name was thriving, and cattle ranches dotted the surrounding valley. Her school would have approximately 30 pupils of varying ages and abilities, from 6-year-olds to teenagers preparing for possible further education. After Eleanor's departure, Olivia spent the morning organizing her quarters and inspecting the schoolroom. The space was well maintained, with rows of desks facing a large blackboard, a pot-bellied stove in the corner, and shelves of books that, while limited, showed someone had cared about education. A framed copy of the Declaration of Independence hung beside a map of the United States, both slightly faded but proudly displayed. As promised, Eleanor returned that afternoon, and Olivia found herself being paraded through town, introduced to what felt like every resident of Timber Creek. The general store owner, Mr. Peterson, insisted on extending her credit until her first paycheck. Mrs. Wilson at the dress shop offered to alter any garments she might need adjusted. Dr. Adams, a surprisingly young physician with spectacles and an earnest manner, assured her he was available day or night should she require medical attention. Everyone was unfailingly polite, but Olivia couldn't help noticing the curious glances, the whispers that followed in their wake. She was used to being an object of gossip, but this felt different, less malicious, more speculative. "They're just curious," Eleanor explained as they walked back toward the schoolhouse. "We haven't had a new schoolteacher in 5 years, and never one from so far east. You're something of a novelty." "I've been a novelty before," Olivia said quietly. "It doesn't tend to end well." Eleanor patted her arm sympathetically. "Give them time. Timber Creek looks rough around the edges, but there's a strong community here. You'll see." That evening, as Olivia sat at her small table planning lessons by lamplight, another knock came at her door. This time, it was Deputy Lancaster who stood on her porch, hat in hand, looking decidedly uncomfortable. "Miss Caldwell," he said, nodding stiffly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, Deputy," she replied, wondering at his presence. "Is something wrong?"
"No, madam."
"I just wanted to return this." He held out a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "Found it in the street after yesterday's unpleasantness." Olivia unwrapped the package to find her father's pocket watch, which she'd thought lost in the chaos. The silver case was dented but intact, and when she pressed the clasp, it still opened to reveal her mother's portrait inside. "It was my father's," she explained, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Thank you for returning it." Lancaster nodded, his expression softening slightly. "Figured it might be important." He hesitated, then added, "Sheriff asked me to let you know we caught the men responsible for yesterday's robbery. They won't be troubling Timber Creek again."
"That's
reassuring." An awkward silence fell between them. Lancaster cleared his throat. "Mayor Bennett mentioned you might need some repairs to your quarters. Roof's been known to leak when the rains come." "Mrs. Bennett, Eleanor didn't mention anything about leaks," Olivia said, glancing upward reflexively. "Probably didn't want to worry you," he replied. "I could take a look if you'd permit it. Better to fix it before the autumn storms." Olivia hesitated. In Boston, allowing a single man into her home would be scandalous. But this wasn't Boston, and Lancaster was an officer of the law. "That would be most appreciated, Deputy." "Thank you." He nodded again, seeming relieved to have a concrete purpose. "I'll come by Sunday after church, if that suits." "That would be fine." Another silence stretched between them, less awkward but charged with something Olivia couldn't quite name. "I should let you get back to your evening, Miss Caldwell," Lancaster finally said, stepping back. "Good night." "Good night, Deputy." As she closed the door, Olivia found herself wondering about the taciturn lawman who'd now twice come to her aid. There was more to Lucas Lancaster than met the eye, something in the way he carried himself, in his occasional formal phrasing that seemed at odds with frontier life. Like her, he seemed somewhat out of place in Timber Creek, yet everyone spoke of him with respect. Over the next week, Olivia fell into a routine. Mornings were spent preparing her classroom and curriculum, afternoons exploring the town or receiving visitors, mostly mothers curious about the woman who would be teaching their children. Evenings were for reading and writing letters to the few friends she'd left behind in Boston. She saw Lancaster occasionally in town, always busy with his duties. He would tip his hat politely if their paths crossed, but their interactions remained brief and formal. Still, she found her gaze following him more often than she cared to admit, noting the way he moved with easy confidence through the town, how he seemed to notice everything without appearing to look. Sunday arrived clear and warm. Olivia attended the small white church in the center of town, where she was formally introduced to the congregation by Reverend Thompson. She felt the weight of their collective assessment as she stood before them in her best blue dress, but the smiles seemed genuine enough. After the service, as promised, Lancaster appeared at her door, a toolbox in one hand and a ladder balanced on his shoulder. "Deputy," she greeted him, suddenly conscious of her Sunday best, which felt overdressed for roof repairs. "Miss Caldwell," he replied, then added almost shyly, "You can call me Lucas, when I'm not wearing the badge. Most folks do." It was the first personal overture he'd made, and Olivia found herself unexpectedly pleased. "In that case, I suppose you should call me Olivia when I'm not in the classroom." He nodded, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Fair enough, Olivia." The way he said her name, careful and measured, as if testing the feel of it on his tongue, sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. Lucas set to work examining her roof, climbing the ladder with practiced ease while Olivia hovered uncertainly below. Eventually, she retreated indoors to change into something more practical, emerging in a simple skirt and shirtwaist just as Lucas descended. "Found the problem," he announced. "Some shingles worked loose, and there's a bit of rot in one section. Won't take long to fix. Can I help?" Olivia asked, surprising herself with the offer. Lucas looked equally surprised. "You want to help repair a roof?" "I'm not completely helpless, Deputy Lucas," she corrected herself. "I may have grown up in Boston, but I wasn't raised to be ornamental." A genuine smile broke across his face, transforming his features just as it had that first day. "Never thought you were, Olivia. You can hand me things as I need them, if you're willing." What followed was 2 hours of surprisingly companionable work. Lucas explained what he was doing as he replaced shingles and reinforced weak spots, while Olivia passed him tools and materials. His hands were calloused but deft, handling delicate work with unexpected precision. "You've done this before," she observed as he finished securing the last shingle. "Used to work construction back east," he replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "Before I put on a badge." "What made you change professions?" Olivia asked, genuinely curious. Lucas was quiet for a moment, focused on packing away his tools. "Saw too many people taking advantage of those who couldn't defend themselves. Decided I could do something about it with a badge." There was a story there, Olivia sensed, but she didn't press. Everyone in the West seemed to have a past they'd rather not discuss, herself included. "Well, I'm grateful for your construction experience today," she said instead. "How much do I owe you for the repairs?" Lucas shook his head firmly. "Nothing. Consider it a belated welcome gift." "I can't possibly." "You can," he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "Besides, I enjoyed the work. Makes a nice change from chasing outlaws and breaking up saloon fights." Olivia studied him, this man who had now helped her 3 times without asking anything in return. "At least let me offer you dinner. I'm not much of a cook, I'm afraid, but I can manage something edible." Lucas hesitated, and for a moment Olivia thought he would refuse. Then he nodded. "That would be nice, thank you." As it turned out, not much of a cook was an accurate self-assessment. The chicken ended up dry, the potatoes undercooked, and the biscuits resembled small rocks. Lucas ate everything without complaint, though Olivia caught him subtly reaching for his water glass more often than strictly necessary. "I did warn you," she said finally, unable to maintain the pretense any longer. Lucas's eyes crinkled at the corners. "You did at that." "I never needed to cook in Boston," she explained, embarrassed. "We had staff for that." "Staff?" Lucas raised an eyebrow. Olivia immediately regretted the slip. She'd been careful not to mention her family's position in Boston society, not wanting to seem pretentious. "My father was in banking. We were fortunate." Lucas nodded slowly. "Yet you chose to come teach in a frontier town. That's quite a change." I needed a fresh start, she said simply, unwilling to elaborate on the humiliation she'd left behind. Lucas seemed to sense her reluctance. Well, for what it's worth, I think Timber Creek is fortunate to have you, cooking skills notwithstanding. His gentle teasing eased the tension, and Olivia found herself laughing. Perhaps I should stick to teaching and leave culinary matters to those more qualified. Or I could show you a few tricks, Lucas offered. Learn to cook on cattle drives. Nothing fancy, but it'll keep you from starving. You would do that?
Sure.
Consider it payment for this excellent meal. His deadpan delivery made her laugh again. As Lucas prepared to leave that evening, Olivia found herself reluctant to see him go. Their conversation had flowed easily once the initial awkwardness passed, ranging from books they'd read to their observations about Timber Creek and its colorful inhabitants. "Thank you again for fixing the roof," she said as they stood at the door. "My pleasure." He settled his hat on his head, then paused. "There's a town social next Saturday. Dance at the meeting hall. Might be a good opportunity for you to meet more folks before school starts." "Are you asking me to attend with you, Deputy?" Olivia found herself holding her breath as she waited for his answer. Lucas's eyes held hers steadily. "I believe I am, Miss Caldwell. If you'd care to, that is." "I would," she replied, perhaps too quickly. "Care to, that is." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth.
Good.
"I'll call for you at 7 then." "I'll be ready." As she watched him walk away, Olivia felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, a lightness she hadn't experienced in longer than she could remember. For the first time since arriving in Timber Creek, she felt as though perhaps, just perhaps, she might find a place for herself here after all. The week leading up to the social passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. School would begin the following Monday, and Olivia threw herself into final arrangements for her classroom, testing each student's knowledge level. Yet her thoughts frequently drifted to Lucas and their upcoming evening together. Eleanor Bennett visited midweek, ostensibly to discuss the school board's expectations, but clearly bursting with curiosity about Olivia's relationship with the deputy. "The whole town's talking about Lucas fixing your roof," she said, accepting a cup of tea, "and staying for dinner afterward." Olivia felt her cheeks warm. He was simply being neighborly. "Lucas Lancaster doesn't do neighborly with just anyone," Eleanor replied with a knowing smile. "I've been trying to get him to attend church socials for 3 years without success, yet he's escorting you to the dance on Saturday." "News travels fast," Olivia observed dryly. "It's a small town," Eleanor shrugged. "But I'm glad. Lucas needs someone who can match him. He's too serious for his own good." "We're simply attending a social function together," Olivia protested. "It's hardly a romantic connection." Eleanor's expression turned more serious. "Can I speak frankly, Olivia?" "Of course. Lucas is respected in this town, but he keeps to himself. Whatever brought him West left scars, though he never speaks of it. This is the first time since he arrived that he's shown interest in anyone beyond his duties." She reached across the table to squeeze Olivia's hand. "I don't mean to put pressure on you. I just want you to know that it's significant his asking you to the social." Olivia didn't know how to respond. Her own reasons for coming to Timber Creek were wrapped in pain, and humiliation. Being jilted had merely been the final blow after years of subtle cruelties from Boston society. Her family's financial reversals following her father's death had transformed her from desirable match to pitiable charity case overnight. The teaching position had been her escape, a chance to be valued for her mind rather than her diminished social position. "I have my own ghosts, Eleanor," she said finally. "I'm not sure I'm in a position to help anyone else with theirs. Sometimes two broken people fit together in ways that make them both stronger," Eleanor replied softly. "Just something to consider." Saturday evening arrived clear and mild, with a crispness to the air that hinted at the approaching autumn. Olivia had fretted over her limited wardrobe before settling on her best dress, a deep green silk with modest lace trim that complemented her auburn hair. It was more formal than frontier fashion dictated, but it was one of the few possessions that reminded her of happier times. At precisely 7 o'clock, a knock sounded at her door. When she opened it, Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Lucas stood before her, transformed from the dusty lawman she'd come to know. He wore a crisp white shirt under a dark vest and jacket, his usually unruly hair tamed and his face freshly shaved. Only the weathered cowboy hat in his hands remained familiar. "Olivia," he greeted her, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she managed, suddenly shy. "You clean up rather well yourself, Deputy." His mouth quirked in that half-smile she was coming to treasure. "Figured I should make an effort. Can't have the new schoolteacher thinking the law in Timber Creek is completely uncivilized." The walk to the meeting hall was short but pleasant, with Lucas offering his arm in a gesture that seemed to come naturally to him, despite his frontier surroundings. The setting sun painted the mountains in the distance with purple and gold, while lamps were being lit along the town's main street. "Nervous?" Lucas asked as they approached the hall, where music and laughter already spilled from open windows. "A little," Olivia admitted. "Large gatherings haven't always been kind to me in the past." Lucas stopped, turning to face her. "These are good people, Olivia. They might be curious about you, but they're not cruel. And besides," he added with unexpected fierceness, "I wouldn't let anyone make you uncomfortable." The protectiveness in his voice warmed her more than it should have. "My very own deputy sheriff standing guard? The ladies of Timber Creek will be positively green with envy." Lucas's expression turned serious. "Let them be." The intensity in his blue eyes made Olivia's heart skip a beat. Before she could respond, he offered his arm again. "Shall we?" The meeting hall had been transformed for the occasion. Paper lanterns hung from the rafters, tables laden with food lined one wall, and a small band played lively tunes on a raised platform. Nearly the entire town seemed to be present, from elders in their Sunday best to children darting between adults' legs. Their entrance caused a momentary lull in conversations, followed by a buzz of interest that made Olivia's cheeks warm. Lucas, seemingly oblivious to the attention, guided her through the crowd, stopping to introduce her to those she hadn't yet met. Sheriff Miller, a grizzled man with kind eyes, clapped Lucas on the shoulder. "Never thought I'd see the day you willingly attended a social, Lancaster. Miss Caldwell must be quite persuasive." "Just doing my civic duty, Sheriff," Lucas replied dryly. "Making sure our new teacher feels welcome." "Is that what they're calling it these days?" The sheriff winked at Olivia. "You've accomplished what 3 years of nagging couldn't, Miss Caldwell. I'm impressed." As the evening progressed, Olivia found herself genuinely enjoying the community's company. The people of Timber Creek were straightforward but warm, curious about her background but respectful of her privacy. When Lucas finally asked her to dance, she accepted eagerly, despite her concerns about remembering the steps. "It's been some time since I attended a proper dance," she confessed as he led her to the floor. "Just follow my lead," he said, placing one hand at her waist and taking her hand with the other. "It'll come back to you." The music was a simple waltz, and to Olivia's surprise, Lucas moved with unexpected grace, guiding her confidently through the steps. His hand at her waist was warm and steady, his eyes never leaving hers as they turned around the floor. "Where did a frontier lawman learn to waltz?" she asked, breathless from more than just the dance. A shadow crossed his face. "Another life. Before." Olivia didn't press, but she squeezed his hand gently, an acknowledgement of whatever pain lay beneath his words. "Well, I'm grateful for it now." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions and possibilities. Then Lucas pulled her slightly closer, still perfectly proper but intimate enough to send her pulse racing. "So am I," he murmured. They danced 3 more times before taking a break for refreshments. As Lucas went to fetch them punch, Olivia found herself approached by an older woman she recognized as Mrs. Peterson, the general store owner's wife. "He hasn't danced at a social since he came to town," the woman said without preamble. "Not once in 3 years, no matter how many pretty girls batted their eyelashes at him." Olivia wasn't sure how to respond. Perhaps he simply felt obligated, as I'm new to town. Mrs. Peterson's laugh was kind but knowing. Lucas Lancaster doesn't do anything out of obligation that isn't related to that badge he wears. "No, Miss Caldwell, I think you've accomplished something special." Before Olivia could reply, Lucas returned with 2 cups of punch, nodding politely to Mrs. Peterson. "Evening, madam. Enjoying the festivities?" "Immensely," the older woman replied with a smile. "Especially watching you remember you're more than just a deputy." She patted Olivia's arm. "You hold on to this one, dear. She's good for you." As Mrs. Peterson walked away, Lucas looked momentarily discomfited. "Sorry about that. People here can be perceptive," Olivia suggested. "Nosy," he corrected, but his eyes crinkled with amusement. Though in this case, not entirely wrong. Olivia's heart fluttered at the implication. "Oh." Lucas set down his cup, his expression turning serious. "Would you care to step outside for a moment? It's getting warm in here." The night air was cool and refreshing after the crowded hall. Lucas led her to a small garden behind the building, where a bench sat beneath a sprawling cottonwood tree. Lantern light from the hall windows provided just enough illumination to see his face as they sat. "I'm not good at this," he said after a moment of silence. "Speaking about feelings." Olivia waited, sensing he needed to find his own words. "When I came to Timber Creek, I wasn't looking for anything but a place to do some good," he continued. "After what happened back east, I didn't think I deserved anything more." "What happened?" Olivia asked softly. Lucas stared into the darkness. "I was a lawman in Pennsylvania. Coal country. The mining companies ran everything, including most of the local sheriffs. I was young, idealistic. Thought I could make a difference." His jaw tightened. "There was a strike. The company brought in Pinkertons. Things got ugly. People died who shouldn't have. Including someone you cared about," Olivia guessed, hearing the pain beneath his measured words. He nodded once. "My brother. He was a minor. I couldn't protect him, even with a badge." His hands clenched into fists. "Afterward, I couldn't stay. Couldn't face our parents. So I headed west. Figured I'd try to do better elsewhere." Olivia reached out, covering his fist with her hand. "I'm sorry, Lucas." He turned his hand over, capturing hers. "I didn't think I'd ever want to let anyone close again. Too risky. Too painful, if I failed them." His eyes met hers in the dim light. "Then you arrived in the middle of a gunfight, looking terrified but determined, asking about the schoolhouse like bullets weren't flying around your head." Despite the seriousness of the moment, Olivia felt a smile tug at her lips. "Not my finest hour." "It was impressive," Lucas countered. "And every time I've seen you since, you've surprised me. Your resilience, your kindness, the way you refuse to be intimidated by this rough place or its rough people." His thumb traced patterns on her palm. "You make me want things I thought I'd given up on, Olivia." Her heart pounded so loudly, she was certain he must hear it. "What sort of things?" "A future. A home that's more than just a place to sleep." He paused, vulnerability naked in his eyes. "Someone to share it with." Olivia swallowed hard. "I should tell you why I left Boston." "You don't have to, I want to," she interrupted. "If we're being honest with each other." Lucas nodded, waiting. "My father died 5 years ago," she began. "He'd made some poor investments before his death, and we discovered afterward that what had appeared to be a comfortable fortune was mostly debt. My mother followed him within the year, a heart condition, the doctor said, but I think it was really grief and shame." She took a steadying breath. "I was engaged at the time to a man from a good family, Charles Whitfield. When my circumstances changed, he became
distant.
Made excuses to delay the wedding. I told myself he was simply being practical, that once I sorted out the financial matters, things would return to normal. The memory still stung, but less sharply than before. 3 months ago, I discovered he'd been courting my cousin Emily behind my back. Younger, prettier, and most importantly, still wealthy. They announced their engagement at what was supposed to be our wedding breakfast. Lucas's hand tightened around hers. He's a fool. That's kind of you to say. Olivia smiled sadly. But the truth is, Boston society agreed with him. I became an object of pity at best, mockery at worst. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Wyoming territory, it felt like Providence a chance to be valued for my mind rather than my diminished social position. Is that why you thought you would never belong anywhere again? Lucas asked perceptively. Because one shallow man and his equally shallow society rejected you? Put that way, it did sound rather self-pitying. It wasn't just Charles. It was discovering that everything I thought defined me, my family name, my social position, my future as a wife and mother, could vanish so completely. I didn't know who I was anymore. Lucas reached up, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. I see who you are, Olivia Caldwell. I've seen it since that first day. You're stronger than you know, braver than most men I've met, and far too intelligent to waste your time on people who can't appreciate that. The tenderness in his voice undid her. Lucas. I'm not Charles Whitfield, he said firmly. I don't care about your family name or what society thinks. I care about the woman who faces down bank robbers to ask about her teaching position. The woman who offers to help repair a roof in her Sunday best. The woman who burns chicken but serves it anyway. Despite herself, Olivia laughed. That chicken was awful. Terrible, he agreed, smiling. But I'd eat it every day for the rest of my life, if it meant spending time with you. The implication of his words hung in the air between them. Olivia's breath caught. Lucas, are you saying? I'm saying I'm falling in love with you, Olivia Caldwell, he interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes. I thought I was imagining it, the way I felt drawn to you from the beginning. Lucas cupped her face gently. You weren't imagining anything. When he kissed her, it was tender and questioning at first, then deepening as she responded. His arms encircled her, pulling her closer, and Olivia felt as though something long broken inside her was finally healing. They returned to the dance eventually, though Olivia was certain everyone could see the change between them. She didn't care. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, she felt truly seen and accepted for exactly who she was. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of new experiences. School began, and Olivia found herself challenged and fulfilled by her 30 pupils, each with their own personalities and needs. The townspeople accepted her completely, no longer as a curiosity, but as their teacher and, increasingly, as Lucas Lancaster's sweetheart. For his part, Lucas courted her properly, but with unmistakable intensity. He brought wildflowers to her door, escorted her to church each Sunday, and spent evenings at her quarters, teaching her to cook simple but edible meals. They read together by lamplight. He had a surprising fondness for Dickens and shared stories of their lives before Timber Creek. It was during one such evening, 2 months after the social, that Lucas set aside his book and took her hands in his. I have something to ask you, he said, his usual confidence giving way to nervous energy. Olivia's heart began to race. Yes. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. I know it hasn't been long, but when you know, you know. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band set with a small diamond. I love you, Olivia Caldwell. I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me? Tears blurred her vision. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Lucas, I will. His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "It's not fancy, it's perfect," she interrupted, throwing her arms around his neck. "Absolutely perfect." They were married 3 weeks later in Timber Creek's white church, with the entire town in attendance. Sheriff Miller stood as Lucas's best man, while Eleanor Bennett served as Olivia's matron of honor. As Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Olivia felt the last of her doubts dissolve. "I now present to you Mr. and Mrs. Lucas Lancaster," the Reverend announced to applause and cheers. Lucas leaned down to whisper in her ear as they walked back down the aisle. "Mrs. Lancaster. How does it sound?" Olivia smiled up at him, her heart full, like belonging. And as they stepped out into the bright Wyoming sunshine, surrounded by the community that had become her home, Olivia knew it was true. The woman who thought she would never belong had found her place not in Boston society or even in Timber Creek itself, but beside the man who had placed his last name next to hers and his heart in her keeping.